My name is David Park. I'm what you'd call an airport security officer, though that title sounds far more official than what I actually do. I walk empty corridors at 3 a.m., check locks on doors that haven't been opened in years, and try not to think about the sounds that echo through Terminal C after midnight. 6 months ago, I was an air traffic controller at O'Hare. One of the good ones, too. The kind who could juggle 20 aircraft in a holding pattern while eating lunch and filling out paperwork. I'd spent 12 years guiding planes through some of the busiest airspace in the world, and I was proud of it. Every landing was a small victory. Every safe departure was a life I'd helped protect. Then came Flight 447. It was a routine approach on a clear Tuesday morning. A 737 inbound from Denver, nothing special. I'd guided thousands just like it. But something went wrong with my spatial processing that day. Maybe fatigue, maybe the 3 cups of coffee on an empty stomach, maybe just the accumulation of 12 years of hypervigilance finally catching up. I cleared Flight 447 to land on runway 27L. The problem was, I'd already cleared another plane to cross that same runway. The pilot of 447 saw it first, thank God. Pulled up hard, engine screaming, missing the other aircraft by less than 50 feet. No collision, no casualties, just a near miss that got filed in a report somewhere. But I saw it all on my scope, 2 dots converging where they should never have converged, almost becoming 1 dot, almost becoming a number in a statistics column about aviation disasters. I never went back to the tower after that day. The FAA offered me counseling, a different position, even a transfer to a smaller airport. But every time I looked at a radar screen, all I could see were those 2 dots almost touching. My hands would shake. My throat would close up. The doctor called it acute stress disorder with a side of scopophobia, fear of being watched or stared at. Ironic, considering I'd spent my career staring at screens, being watched by supervisors, watching planes full of people who trusted me with their lives. I bounced around for a few months, tried working retail, lasted 2 weeks before the Christmas rush made me walk out mid-shift. Attempted data entry for an insurance company, but the screens brought back the radar memories. Even tried construction, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking when I held power tools. The job posting appeared on a forum for former aviation workers. Night security officer needed for regional airport. Experience with airport operations preferred but not required. Must be comfortable with solitude. Pine Creek Regional Airport. I'd never heard of it, which was strange. I thought I knew every airport within 500 miles of Chicago. Turned out it was tucked away in the northwest corner of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, servicing maybe 10 flights a day, mostly puddle jumpers and cargo runs. The pay was decent, considering. More importantly, it was far enough from O'Hare that no one would know who I was or what I'd almost done. The drive up took 9 hours through increasingly desolate country. The forests got thicker, the towns got smaller, and eventually, even the radio stations faded to static. Pine Creek Regional appeared at the end of a 2-lane road that cut through a pine forest so dense it looked like a wall of green-black in my headlights. The airport was bigger than I'd expected. 3 terminals arranged in a Y shape, though only Terminal A looked operational. Terminal B was dark, its windows reflecting the setting sun like dead eyes. Terminal C, something about Terminal C made me look away. It squatted at the end of the furthest runway like a concrete tumor, all wrong angles and too many shadows. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars clustered near Terminal A and a lone security vehicle parked by what looked like the administration building. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, wondering what the hell I was doing here. But the silence was nice. No radio chatter, no supervisors, no dots on screens converging toward disaster. Just an empty airport at the edge of nowhere, waiting for someone to watch over it through the night. The airport, Pine Creek Regional Airport, had the feel of a place that had been forgotten but refused to disappear entirely. Built in 1971 during a brief period when the logging industry thought it needed better transportation infrastructure, it had been designed to handle far more traffic than it ever saw. The architect, apparently, had been an optimist. Terminal A handled the few daily commercial flights, 2 regional carriers that connected to Detroit and Minneapolis, a twice-weekly cargo service, and the occasional private charter. It was clean, functional, almost aggressively normal. The kind of place where you could pretend you were at any small airport in America. Terminal B had been closed since 2008. Budget constraints, according to the official records, though I'd later learn the truth was more complicated. It stood connected to Terminal A by a long corridor that had been sealed off with a chain-link fence and a sign reading, "No entry, structural maintenance." Through the fence, I could see the old gates, their numbers still visible but fading. The seats were still there, arranged in neat rows, covered in a thick layer of dust that seemed too uniform, too deliberate, like someone had placed it there rather than let it accumulate naturally. Terminal C was the problem. It had been built in 1984 as part of an expansion that never quite made sense. Who builds a third terminal when the first two are barely used? It stood separate from the others, connected only by an underground tunnel system that had been sealed with concrete in 1991. The official reason was water damage and structural instability. The unofficial reason, the one I'd learned from Hank, was that people who went into Terminal C's tunnels started seeing things that weren't there. Or maybe things that were there but shouldn't be. My duties, as outlined in the employee handbook, were straightforward. Patrol Terminal A every 2 hours. Check all entry points for security breaches. Monitor the parking lots and perimeter fencing. Report any unusual activity to the day shift supervisor. Perform a weekly inspection of Terminal B's exterior. Never, under any circumstances, enter Terminal C. That last line had been added by hand, in fading blue ink, at the bottom of the typed page. The security office was located in Terminal A's basement, a cramped room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. 3 walls were covered in monitors showing feeds from security cameras throughout the airport. The 4th wall was blank except for a corkboard covered in faded safety notices, work schedules, and a large map of the airport that looked hand-drawn. Someone had marked certain areas on the map with red X's. Gate B, 7. The Terminal C tunnel entrance. A section of runway that didn't seem to connect to anything. And strangest of all, a spot in the middle of Terminal A's main concourse, with a note that simply said, "Do not stand here after 2 a.m." The equipment was a mix of old and new. A modern computer system for logging incidents, an ancient radio that looked like it belonged in a museum, a ring of keys that must have weighed 5 pounds, and a flashlight that felt reassuringly heavy in my hand. There was also a laminated card in the desk drawer, about the size of a playing card, with 4 rules printed on it. Complete all Terminal A patrols before 2 a.m. If you hear flight announcements for gates in Terminal B, do not investigate. The figure at Gate C, 13, is not a person. Between 3:17 and 3:33 a.m., remain in the security office. I was studying this card when the door opened behind me. Meeting Hank. "You'd be David, then?" The voice was gravelly, like decades of cigarettes and coffee had scraped it raw. I turned to find a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same wood as the forests outside. Probably mid-60s, though he could have been anywhere from 50 to 70. Gray hair cut military short, a face mapped with wrinkles, and what looked like old burn scars along his jaw. His uniform was impeccable, but worn, the kind of worn that comes from 1,000 nights of use, not neglect. "Hank Morrison," he said, extending a hand that felt like a leather glove filled with steel cables. "I'll be showing you the ropes for your first week. After that, you're on your own." He had a slight limp, favoring his left leg, and I noticed he kept his right hand close to his hip, where a flashlight hung from his belt. Not a flashlight, the flashlight. It looked like mine, but older, its metal surface covered in scratches and dings that suggested years of hard use. 27 years I've been walking these halls," Hank said, settling into the other chair with a grunt. "Started back when Terminal C was still open to the public. Watched them seal it up. Watched them try to reopen it in 99. Watched them seal it up again." He pulled a thermos from his bag, and the smell of coffee, good coffee, not the burnt swill I'd been smelling, filled the small room. "Why'd they seal it?" I asked. Hank studied me for a long moment, those gray eyes taking my measure. "You ever work airports before?" "O'Hare, air traffic control." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy. Then you know airports have patterns, rhythms, flight schedules, passenger flow, the way sound moves through the terminals. It all follows rules. I nodded. Terminal C doesn't follow rules. He poured coffee into the thermos cap, took a sip. Never did, even when it was brand new. Planes would park at gates that didn't exist. Passengers would board flights that were never scheduled. And the night shift. He trailed off, shaking his head. What about the night shift? We started losing people. Not killed, not exactly. They'd clock in for their shift, make their first patrol, and then, different. Like something had been taken out of them. Or maybe something had been put in. Guy named Rodriguez. Good man. Family man. Worked here for 6 years. One night, he goes into Terminal C to check a reported security breach. Comes back 3 hours later speaking a language no one could identify. Not Spanish, not anything. Took him 2 weeks in a psychiatric ward to remember English. I started to say impossible, but the word died in my throat. Hank didn't look like a man who told stories for effect. The rules, he said, tapping the laminated card I'd left on the desk, aren't suggestions. They're not some corporate liability bullshit. They're survival techniques, learned the hard way by people like me who've been here long enough to see patterns. He stood up, his knee popping audibly. Come on, let's walk Terminal A. I'll show you the safe routes. We spent the next 3 hours walking the terminal. Hank showed me how to check doors without actually touching them first. Sometimes they're too cold or too hot, and that means something's wrong on the other side. He taught me to listen for the hum of the fluorescent lights. If they go quiet, you go back to the office. Don't ask why, just go. He pointed out the spots where the security cameras had blind spots, and more importantly, the spots where the cameras could see things that human eyes couldn't. Gate A7, he said, stopping at an otherwise unremarkable gate area. Camera picks up shapes here sometimes. Tall, thin, moving wrong. But when you look with your eyes, nothing. Trust the cameras, but don't watch them too long. Sometimes they show you things that haven't happened yet. As we walked, he told me fragments of the airport's history, built on land that the local Ojibwe had avoided for generations. 3 construction workers died during the building of Terminal C. All fell from places that shouldn't have been dangerous. A flight that landed in 1987 with all passengers and crew unconscious, but unharmed, with no memory of the flight's last hour. Why do you stay? I asked as we completed our circuit of Terminal A. Hank was quiet for a long time, looking out the windows at the dark runway. Someone has to. These things, whatever they are, they're contained here. As long as someone follows the rules, keeps watch, maintains the boundaries, they stay contained. He turned to me. Plus, the retirement package is excellent. That got a laugh out of me, the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. The first week. My training week fell into a routine quickly. I'd arrive at 10 p.m. Hank would already be there with fresh coffee and that same weathered expression. We'd review the previous night's logs, always uneventful, at least on paper, and then begin our patrols. He taught me the real rules, the ones that weren't written down anywhere. The janitor you might see in Terminal A after midnight isn't a janitor. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak to him. Just nod and keep walking. He's harmless as long as you don't acknowledge what he really is. If you smell jet fuel inside the terminal, leave immediately. There hasn't been a fuel leak here since 1994, so that smell means something else. The payphones in Terminal B still ring sometimes. You can hear them through the fence. Never answer them. Count the gates when you patrol. Terminal A has 12 gates. If you count 13, don't look at the extra one. On my 4th night, I finally asked about the hand-drawn map on the wall. Drew that myself, Hank said with a hint of pride. The official blueprints don't show everything. They don't show the door in the maintenance tunnel that leads to nowhere. They don't show that gate B7 is 6 feet wider than it should be. They don't show the room. The room, sub-basement of Terminal C, found it by accident in '98. It's not on any blueprint, not in any construction record. It's just there. Concrete walls, no door, no way it could have been built after the fact. But if you measure the terminal from the outside and compare it to the inside, there's 50 square feet unaccounted for. What's in it? Don't know. Can't get in. Don't want to get in. But sometimes, on the cameras that monitor the tunnel entrance, you can see light coming from underneath where the door should be. My 5th night was when things started to get strange. I was doing my 2 a.m. patrol. Hank had emphasized completing all Terminal A patrols before 2 a.m., but hadn't explained why when I heard it. A flight announcement, crystal clear, echoing through the empty terminal. Flight 447 to Chicago O'Hare is now boarding at Gate B7. My blood turned to ice. Flight 447. My flight. The one I'd almost. Don't. Hank's hand was on my shoulder. I hadn't heard him approach. That's how it gets you. It knows things, pulls them out of your head, uses them as bait. But it's not real. Flight 447 isn't here. Gate B, 7 has been closed for 16 years. How does it know? Same way it knew Rodriguez's mother's maiden name. Same way it knew my daughter's birthday. Same way it knows things that haven't happened yet. He guided me back toward the security office. The airport remembers. Everything that passes through here, every person, every fear, every regret, it remembers. And sometimes it plays those memories back. Rule 1. Complete all terminal patrols before 2 a.m. Hank explained this rule on my 6th night, after I'd asked why the timing mattered so much. Terminal A is safe ground, he said, checking his watch. It was 11:47 p.m., but only until 2 a.m. After that, the boundaries get soft. Things from Terminal B and C start bleeding through. Not physically. The doors stay locked, the fences stay up, but in other ways. I'd been skeptical. It sounded like the kind of superstition that builds up in any isolated workplace. But Hank had been right about everything else, so I followed the rule. Every night, I complete my Terminal A patrols by 1:45 a.m., giving myself a buffer. It was my 2nd week flying solo when I learned why the rule existed. I'd been delayed by a real security issue. Some teenagers had hopped the fence and were spray painting the side of a cargo hangar. By the time I'd chased them off and filed the report, it was 1:58 a.m. I still had to check the gates at the far end of Terminal A. Just this once, I told myself. What's 2 minutes? The terminal felt different after 2 a.m. It's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it. The lights were the same brightness, but the shadows were deeper. The air was the same temperature, but it felt thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. And the sounds, airports are never truly quiet. There's always the hum of ventilation, the distant rumble of generators, the occasional creak of settling metal. But after 2 a.m., there were other sounds underneath those normal ones. Whispers in languages that weren't quite languages. Footsteps that matched mine, but were always a half-second off. I was checking Gate A, 10, when I saw the first passenger. She was sitting in the waiting area, dressed in clothes from the 1980s, a powder blue business suit with massive shoulder pads, hair permed and frozen in a style that hadn't been popular for 30 years. She had a boarding pass in her hand and a carry-on bag at her feet. "Excuse me," she said, and her voice was wrong. Too hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Is Flight 815 delayed?" I knew that flight number. I'd looked it up after Hank mentioned the airport's history. Flight 815 was a commuter flight to Detroit that crashed on approach in 1987. No survivors. "Ma'am, you need to." I started, but stopped. She was looking at me now, and her eyes weren't right. They were too deep, like looking into holes cut straight through her head to some dark space beyond. More passengers were appearing. They materialized in the seats like fog condensing into human shapes, all dressed in outdated clothes, all holding boarding passes for flights that no longer existed, all with those same hollow eyes. "Is Flight 815 delayed?" the woman asked again. Her mouth moved wrong, like she was remembering how to form words rather than actually speaking them. I backed away slowly, Hank's training kicking in. Don't run. Running acknowledges that something is wrong, and acknowledgement gives them power. Just walk away purposefully, like you have somewhere else to be. But they were everywhere now. Dozens of them, filling every seat in the gate area. Some from the 80s, some from the 90s. One man in a fedora who looked like he'd stepped out of the 1950s. All asking about their flights. All staring with those terrible, hollow eyes. Flight 247 to Minneapolis? Has Flight 932 started boarding? I've been waiting so long. So long. When can we leave? I made it to the security door, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. Behind me, I could hear them standing up, hear the rustle of clothes that shouldn't exist, the shuffle of feet that didn't quite touch the ground. The door slammed behind me, and suddenly everything was normal again. The sound returned to its regular frequency. The air thinned out. Through the security window, I could see the gate area, empty, dust-covered, exactly as it should be. I checked my watch, 2:19 a.m. Now I always finish my patrols before 2 a.m. Always. Even if the building is on fire, even if there's a real security threat, even if the president himself shows up demanding a tour. Because those passengers are still there, waiting just on the other side of 2 a.m., and they're getting impatient. Hank told me later that they appear more solid each year, more real, more present. He thinks one day they'll be solid enough to follow someone back, to finally catch their flights. I don't want to be here when that happens. Rule 2. If you hear flight announcements for gates in Terminal B, do not investigate. Terminal B had been closed for 16 years, but its intercom system still worked. This shouldn't have been possible. The terminal's power had been cut, its systems decommissioned, but Pine Creek Regional didn't follow normal rules. 3 weeks into my solo shifts, I understood why this rule existed. It started subtly. I was doing paperwork in the security office when I heard it. A muffled announcement, barely audible, like it was coming through several walls. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was familiar, the cadence of a gate agent announcing a boarding call. I ignored it. Hank had trained me well, but the announcements got louder each night, clearer. By the 5th night, I could understand them perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now beginning pre-boarding for Flight 1091 to Boston, departing from Gate B4. We invite passengers needing special assistance, families with small children, and our first-class passengers to board at this time. The thing was, the voice was familiar. It took me 3 nights to place it. It was Sarah Chun, a gate agent I'd known at O'Hare. We dated briefly, nothing serious, just coffee and conversation between shifts. She died in a car accident 2 years ago. That's when I understood the airport's cruelty. It didn't just know your fears and regrets. It knew your grief, your losses, your connections to people who were gone. The announcements became more personal after that. David Park, please report to Gate B4. David Park, you have an urgent message at Gate B4. Mr. Park, Sarah Chun is waiting for you at Gate B4. She says she's been trying to reach you. David, please. I'm so cold. Gate B4. Please come. One night, the pressure became too much. It was 1 a.m., and the announcements had been going for an hour straight. Sarah's voice, over and over, begging me to come to Gate B4. I knew it was a trap, knew it wasn't really her, but grief makes you stupid. I stood at the chain-link fence separating Terminal A from Terminal B. Through the fence, I could see the old corridor stretching into darkness. But there was light coming from somewhere deeper in, a flickering, unsteady glow, like fluorescent bulbs on their last legs. David, I can see you. You're so close. Just climb the fence. Gate B4. My hand was on the fence when I felt it. The metal was warm. Not just warm, but exactly 98.6 degrees. Body temperature. And it had a pulse. The entire fence was pulsing with a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. I jerked my hand back, and that's when I saw what was really in Terminal B. The corridor wasn't empty. It was full of people, or things that used to be people. They stood in perfect rows, like they were queuing for something. But they were wrong. Their bodies were stretched, pulled like taffy, arms and legs too long, torsos compressed. Their faces were the worst part. Features scrambled, eyes where mouths should be, mouths opening in places that didn't make sense. And at the front of the queue, standing at what must have been Gate B4, was something wearing Sarah's face. Not Sarah. It had her features, but they were arranged on a head that was too large, neck too long, body too angular. It smiled with too many teeth and waved with a hand that had too many joints. David, it said, and its voice was Sarah's but played backward and forward at the same time. Your flight is boarding. I ran. Screw Hank's advice about not running. Sometimes running is the only sane response. I locked myself in the security office and didn't come out until my shift ended. The announcements stopped after that night. But sometimes, when I'm checking the fence, I can see them in Terminal B. Those stretched, wrong people still standing in their perfect queue, still waiting. And at the front, that thing wearing Sarah's face, watching me through the fence with eyes that remember what we were to each other, but doesn't understand what that means. The fence was replaced last month. The work crew said the old one had corroded in a pattern they'd never seen before. The metal had worn away in the shape of handprints, hundreds of them, all from the Terminal B side. All exactly 98.6 degrees. Rule 3. The figure at Gate C, 13, is not a person. Terminal C was visible from certain windows in Terminal A, particularly from the administrative offices on the 2nd floor. During my patrols, I'd sometimes glance across the tarmac at that dark, shuttered building. Most nights, it was simply dead. No lights, no movement, nothing. But Gate C, 13, was different. There was always someone standing there. I first noticed it during my 4th week. From the 2nd floor window, I had a clear view across to Terminal C's gate areas. 12 gates, all dark, all with their jetways retracted or removed entirely. Except Gate C. 13 still had its jetway attached, extending out to nothing. No plane, just empty tarmac. And in the gate area window, silhouetted against some impossible light source, stood a figure. It never moved, never sat, never shifted position, just stood there, facing out toward the runway, arms at its sides. From this distance, it looked like a man in an old pilot's uniform, but something about its proportions was off. Too tall, maybe, or too still, the kind of stillness that living things can't maintain. That's been there since 1991, Hank told me when I asked. Same position, same posture, every single night. Day shift says they've never seen it. Only appears after dark. What is it? The last pilot to fly out of Gate C-13, Captain Theodore Vance. Flight 2819 to Cleveland, November 15th, 1991. Routine departure, until they reached cruising altitude. That's when Cleveland ATC lost contact. The plane flew in a perfect straight line for 6 hours, no response to any communication attempts. Fighter jets were scrambled. They reported seeing the plane flying normally, but the cockpit windows were frosted over from the inside. I waited for him to continue. The plane eventually ran out of fuel and crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. When they found it, every passenger was in their seatbelts fastened, in perfect condition. Dead, but perfect. No injuries, no signs of struggle. The cockpit voice recorder was blank except for the last 30 seconds. You want to know what it recorded? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing. But not human breathing. The rhythm was wrong. Too slow, each breath lasting almost a minute. And behind it, very faint, the sound of someone saying, "I can see everything from up here," over and over. Captain Vance. They never found Captain Vance's body. His uniform was in the pilot's seat, perfectly arranged like someone had laid it out, but he was gone. That's when I understood. The figure at Gate C-13 wasn't standing there, it was watching, waiting. And one night, I found out what it was waiting for. It was 3 a.m., and I was doing my standard window check when I noticed the figure had moved. Not much, just its head, which was now turned toward Terminal A, toward my window, looking directly at me. I should have looked away. Rule 3 explicitly said it wasn't a person, which meant acknowledging it as one was dangerous. But I was transfixed by its face, or what should have been its face. Even from this distance, I could see it was wrong. Features that shifted when I tried to focus on them, like looking at something through water. It raised one hand and waved. Slow, deliberate, mechanical. Then it pointed at me. The window between us cracked. Not from impact, from cold. Frost spread across the glass in perfect spirals, and I could see my breath in the suddenly freezing air. The lights in Terminal A began to flicker. Behind me, every computer monitor in the office turned on, all showing the same image. The view from Gate C-13, looking back at Terminal A. Looking at me, standing in the window. But in the monitor's image, I wasn't alone. There were people standing behind me, dozens of them, all in airline uniforms from different eras, all with frost-covered faces, all perfectly still. I spun around. The office was empty. When I looked back at the monitors, they showed the normal security feeds. When I looked at Terminal C, the figure was back in its original position, facing the runway. But the window never fully unfrosted. Even now, months later, there's a pattern in the glass that won't go away. If you look at it from the right angle, it spells out a flight number, 2819. I don't look at Gate C-13 anymore. I do my patrols, check my windows, but I keep my eyes on Terminal A, because I know now what that thing is waiting for. It's waiting for someone to acknowledge it, to truly see it for what it is. And when someone finally does, when someone finally understands, that's when Flight 2819 will finally complete its journey. Rule 4. Between 3:17 and 3:33 a.m., remain in the security office. This was the rule that seemed most arbitrary. Why those specific 16 minutes? What was special about 3:17 a.m.? It's when they do maintenance, Hank had said, but wouldn't elaborate further. 6 weeks into my solo shifts, I was in the security office at 3:16 a.m., watching the clock. Everything seemed normal. The monitors showed empty corridors, dark gates, nothing unusual. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, all the monitors went black. Not off, black. They were still powered, but showing nothing. Then I heard it, the sound of heavy machinery. Engines, hydraulics, the beep of vehicles backing up, the sounds of an active airport. I looked out the window. The tarmac was full of activity. Fuel trucks, baggage carts, maintenance vehicles, all servicing planes that weren't supposed to be there. Old planes, propeller planes from the 50s, early jets from the 60s, wide bodies from the 70s with airline liveries I recognized from aviation history books. But the vehicles and the people operating them were wrong. They moved in perfect synchronization, like a choreographed dance. Every fuel truck approached at the exact same angle. Every baggage handler lifted with the exact same motion. And they were all translucent, like projections or memories played back at half opacity. The temptation to go outside, to get a closer look, was overwhelming. These were pieces of aviation history, planes I'd only seen in museums, and they were right there. I had my hand on the door handle when I remembered Hank's words. Just stay in the office. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, stay in the office. At 3:25 a.m., I saw why. The workers stopped their synchronized movements all at once, like someone had hit pause. They all turned toward Terminal A, toward the security office, toward me. Even from a distance, I could see their faces were blank, not missing features, but blank, like unfinished drawings. They started walking toward the building, all of them, in perfect unison, their footsteps creating a rhythm that made the windows vibrate. As they got closer, I could see through their translucent bodies to the things inside them. Not organs, not bones, but machinery. Gears and pistons and cables, all working to maintain the illusion of human movement. They reached the windows and pressed against them, dozens of blank faces staring in at me. Their mouths opened, dark holes in those featureless faces, and they spoke in unison. Join the maintenance crew. We need more workers. So much to maintain, so much to preserve. The windows began to crack under their pressure, not breaking, but splintering in spiderweb patterns. The door handle turned on its own. I grabbed the desk, anchoring myself, fighting the pull I felt in my chest, something deeper than physical, like magnetism for the soul. The clock on the wall seemed to slow down, each second stretching longer than the last. 3:32 a.m. The pressure increased. The windows buckled. 3 hours, 32 minutes, and 30 seconds. The door opened a crack, and freezing air rushed in, carrying the smell of old oil and something else. Ozone, like the air before lightning strikes. 3 hours, 32 minutes, and 45 seconds. I could feel myself sliding toward the door, my grip on the desk weakening. 3:33 a.m. Silence. They were gone. All of them. The workers, the planes, the vehicles. The windows were intact. The door was closed and locked. The monitors flickered back to life, showing empty corridors and dark tarmac. The only evidence anything had happened was the pattern of frost on the windows, shaped like dozens of handprints. I found out later from the day shift that every morning at 3:33 a.m., they find evidence of maintenance that was never scheduled. Fuel tanks topped off in planes that haven't moved. Baggage appearing in claim areas for flights that landed years ago. Sometimes they find tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, safety equipment, all models that haven't been manufactured since the 1970s. The airport maintains itself using a crew that shouldn't exist, servicing planes that no longer fly, preserving something that should have been forgotten. And every night, they look for new recruits. The breach. It was 3 months into my tenure when everything went wrong at once. The night started badly. A severe thunderstorm had rolled in around 11 p.m., grounding all flights and battering the airport with rain and hail. The power kept flickering, switching to backup generators every few minutes. Lightning struck close enough that I could feel the electricity in the air, making my hair stand on end. I completed my Terminal A patrols by 1:45 a.m., earlier than usual. Something felt wrong. That crawling sensation you get when you're being watched, but multiplied by 10. The shadows were moving independently of their light sources. The air tasted metallic. At 2:15 a.m., I heard Hank's voice over the radio. "David, we have a problem. Someone's in Terminal C." My blood went cold. Hank wasn't working tonight. He was on vacation, visiting his daughter in Florida. I'd driven him to the airport myself 3 days ago. The storm damaged the fence. The voice continued. "Some kids got in. You need to get them out before." The radio cut to static. I knew it was a trap. Everything about this screamed trap. But if there really were people in Terminal C, teenagers who didn't know the rules, didn't understand what that place was, I couldn't just leave them. I grabbed my flashlight, my keys, and the emergency kit that contained flares, a first aid kit, and a small can of salt. Hank had added that, said not to ask why, just keep it handy. The rain was still pounding as I made my way across the tarmac toward Terminal C. The fence was indeed damaged, torn open in a section near the old ground transportation area. The metal was peeled back like something had pushed through from the inside. Fresh footprints led toward the terminal entrance. The door to Terminal C was open. It shouldn't have been. That door had been welded shut in 1991. But there it stood, wide open, darkness visible beyond the threshold. The footprints led inside. I followed them. The inside of Terminal C was wrong. Not abandoned wrong, active wrong. The lights were on, but they cast shadows upward instead of down. The departure boards were functioning, but they showed flights to places that didn't exist, cities with names I couldn't pronounce, dates that hadn't happened yet, or had happened too long ago. The footprints led toward the gates. I could hear voices ahead, young, scared, calling for help. "Hello," I shouted. "Security." Follow my voice in. The lights went out. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating glimpses of wrong things. Seats that faced backward. Windows that showed daylight despite it being 2:30 a.m. A janitor's cart cleaning the floor by itself, leaving trails of something dark and viscous. The voices were coming from Gate C-13. Of course they were. I found them, 3 teenagers, maybe 17, huddled in the gate area. But something was wrong with the picture. They were too still, arranged too perfectly, like mannequins positioned to look natural. "Help us," one said without moving his mouth. "We're lost." That's when I noticed the figure that was always at Gate C-13 wasn't there. The window was empty for the first time in 30 years. Behind me, I heard breathing. Slow, deep, each breath taking almost a minute. I turned around. Captain Theodore Vance stood there, still in his pilot's uniform from 1991. His face was exactly as wrong as I'd imagined. Features that wouldn't stay still, eyes that showed clouds and sky instead of irises, a mouth that opened onto darkness deeper than the terminal around us. "You acknowledged me," he said in a voice like wind through a crashed fuselage. "You saw me. Now you can join my crew." The teenagers stood up in unison, their movements mechanical. Their faces were starting to shift, features rearranging to match the wrongness of Vance's. I did the only thing I could think of. I threw the salt. It sounds insane, but it worked. The salt hit Vance, and he screamed. Not with his mouth, but with the building itself. The walls groaned, the floor buckled, and every window in Terminal C shattered at once. The teenagers collapsed like cut marionettes. They were real kids, unconscious but breathing. In the distance, I could hear sirens. Someone had called 911 about the break-in. I dragged the kids out one by one, Vance's presence following us, growing stronger. The building was waking up, all of Terminal C responding to his rage. Ceiling tiles fell, walls cracked, and that breathing sound got louder and louder. We made it out just as the first responders arrived. I told them about a structural collapse, probable gas leak, got the kids to the paramedics. "They'd be fine," they said. No memory of entering the terminal. When I looked back at Terminal C, every window was intact. The door was welded shut. But in Gate C-13's window, the figure was back, standing in its usual position. Except now there were 3 more figures standing beside it. The understanding. After the Terminal C incident, I nearly quit. I had my resignation letter typed up, printed, sitting on my desk in the security office. But Hank called me from Florida. "Heard what happened," he said. "You did good, kid. Those figures at Gate C-13. I know. There were only 2 when I started. Now there's 7. Every few years, someone acknowledges them, and they grow in number. But you save those kids. That matters. How do you do it, Hank? How do you keep coming back?" He was quiet for a moment. "My daughter, the one I'm visiting. She was on a plane that landed here in 1998. Middle of the night, emergency landing due to weather. She was 8 years old, traveling with her mom, my ex-wife. They were supposed to stay in the terminal until morning, wait for the weather to clear. I waited for him to continue. Terminal B was still open then. That's where they put the passengers. And something went wrong. The passengers changed, started walking in circles, speaking in unison, their faces going blank. My little girl was turning into one of them. What did you do? I broke every rule. Went into Terminal B during the convergence hour. Faced down things that don't have names. But I got her out. Got all of them out, actually. 43 passengers and crew. The airport, it let them go. But it made me understand something. What? This place is a filter. A boundary. It collects the lost things, the broken things, the things that fall between the cracks of reality. The dead who don't know they're dead. The flights that never landed. The maintenance crew that keeps working decades after they died. It keeps them here, contains them, prevents them from spreading into the world. And we're what? The janitors. We're the guards. We maintain the rules that keep everything in balance. As long as someone's here, someone who understands, the boundary holds. The moment this place is left unguarded, all of it, every ghost, every wrong thing, every impossible horror, spreads out into the world. I looked at my resignation letter, thought about those kids I pulled from Terminal C, thought about Flight 447, the near miss that had destroyed my career, but not any lives. I tore up the letter. The new normal. I've been at Pine Creek Regional Airport for 2 years now. The rules haven't changed, but I understand them better. They're not just survival techniques. They're containment protocols. Every night, I walk the line between the normal world and whatever dimension this airport touches. Every night, I make sure nothing crosses over that shouldn't. Terminal A stays normal because we patrol it, our presence anchoring it to reality. The 2 a.m. deadline exists because that's when the boundary weakens and we need to be clear. Terminal B remains sealed, its phantom passengers contained, their eternal weight preventing them from seeking flights elsewhere. Terminal C and its wrong architecture, its backward shadows and temporal anomalies, stays locked with Captain Vance and his growing crew standing eternal watch at Gate C-13. As long as they're acknowledged but not engaged, they remain stationary. The maintenance window from 3:17 to 3:33 a.m. continues every night. The airport maintains itself using echoes of its past, and we stay hidden so we don't become part of that echo. I've seen new things that aren't in the rules yet. A woman in a 1960s stewardess uniform who walks backward through Terminal A every full moon. A plane that lands on the abandoned North Runway every July 15th, always empty, always gone by morning. Voices in the ventilation system speaking languages that predate human speech. But I document them. I add to Hank's hand-drawn map. I write new rules when necessary. Because someone has to. Someone has to stand watch. Someone has to make sure that whatever this airport really is, portal, prison, purgatory, it remains contained. If you're reading this, you might be wondering why I'm sharing this story. Maybe you're a curious researcher, a paranormal investigator, or just someone who stumbled across this account. If you're the first type, stay away. Your curiosity will get you killed or worse. If you're an investigator, know that this place doesn't want to be investigated. It wants to be fed. Every person who comes here seeking answers becomes part of the question. But if you're like me, someone who's made mistakes, someone running from something, someone who needs purpose even if that purpose is standing guard at the edge of reality, then maybe consider this a job posting. We're always hiring at Pine Creek Regional Airport. The pay is decent, the work is steady, and you'll be doing something important even if no one will ever know about it. Just remember the rules. All of them. Your life depends on it. And when you see the figure at Gate C-13, whatever you do, don't acknowledge it as a person. It hasn't been one for a very long time. If you do end up here one day, Hank and I will have more stories for you. So many more stories. The airport remembers everything, and we're its unwilling historians, cataloging the impossible, one-night shift at a time. Welcome to Pine Creek Regional Airport. Please enjoy your stay. Just don't stay too long.